Helpful for life.
Which brings us to our last method of the day, which is from the OG recipe by Momma G, which is rosemary potatoes with onion. Now this method is by far the easiest and the fastest method. However, it doesn't quite get as crispy as the other two methods we talked about today. But that's perfectly fine because they're still pretty darn tasty. That being said, I hereby sentence you to try out all three of these methods, maybe even with different varieties of potatoes, and report back to me and tell me which one you like the most. You get bonus points if you post on social media and tag us in it. But on to the Momma G recipe. So for this, we typically use Yukon Gold or russet potatoes. So what you're gonna do is you're going to cut those potatoes up into pieces somewhere between, say, I don't know, anywhere between 1/4 inch and 1 inch, but definitely less than 1 inch. And they could be cubes, they can be little planks, whatever. It's not that important. Again, the smaller they are, the crispier they're gonna be, so cut accordingly. Then you'll cut that sweet onion into about 1 inch pieces. Now you want these to be bigger than your potato pieces because as they cook, they will shrink. And if they're too small, they might burn before the potatoes are done. So you got the stuff cut up, grab yourself a pan, line it with foil, and drizzle some olive oil to coat the bottom. Then slice off a couple pats of butter and throw that on the pan as well. Then you'll throw that pan with just the oil and the butter into the oven just long enough for that butter to melt. Bring that pan back out, throw the potatoes and the onions in, give it a good tossing. Your hands are great for this, but you can also use, a spatula or whatever if you're lame like that and you don't want to get your hands dirty. Then you'll season it with salt, pepper, and rosemary. Now, the rosemary we think is gonna taste best when it's fresh, and that's what we've always used because we have a rosemary plant just outside, but you can also use dried if needed. If you're gonna use fresh, just grab the little stem and grab the green stuff and kind of pull it off. And then you'll put that on your cutting board and cut it up so it gets to little smaller pieces and releases some of those oils. If you're gonna be using dried rosemary, just pour a little of the dried rosemary into your palm, take your little pinchers here and give them all a good little crush. Don't be afraid to even maybe use little fingernails. This will kind of break the outside of the rosemary, which will help release more of the juices, it's like essential oil basically. You just kind of pinch it, release it, and that will make them taste better. Once you have the potatoes all coated in all your seasonings and the rosemary, you'll throw it in the oven for about 20 minutes. After those 20 minutes, guess what? Get your spatula, scoop, toss, whatever those words are that you need to do to get them mixed around. Then you'll throw that pan back in the oven for another 15 to 20 minutes or until they reach your desired level of crispiness.
Just look at these guys. They're so crispy. They have the rosemary on them. Look at all that beautiful browning. And let's just pick one of these up to see what that sounds like. That is delicious.
And that is it. That wraps up the 3 methods to get amazingly delicious, crispy potatoes. Now, we couldn't not tell you about one other recipe that you may or may not have heard about, but is definitely delicious. And this last method is definitely not healthy, but it is amazing. And here in the South, it's maybe called like a hash brown casserole or something like that. And in Utah, they call it funeral potatoes, which I think they also do in the North. I'm not sure, but basically they call it funeral potatoes because it's taken to funerals and potlucks and things like that. Anyways, what they are is basically diced potatoes, maybe with some onion in there, but definitely with lots of cheese and maybe some other things to make it kind of creamy and amazing. And then the fun part is that's all in a casserole pan and then sprinkled with something crispy, whether it be cornflakes or potato chips or whatever. And then it's put in the oven like that. And then you eat it and you get the crispy from the top, you get the ooey gooey from the middle. It's good. You should look it up, you should try it, but maybe check with your doctor first. So now that actually wraps up all the potato methods we're gonna be telling you about today. So hopefully that's enough to tickle your taste buds and get you into the potato game. Let's move on to some other people's favorite food group, pasta.